He looked at me kind of funny and was like, do you want to work here?
How to Get a Job in the Bike Industry, featuring Ariel Lindsley. We all love riding bikes, tinkering on bikes, and meeting other bike nerds. So what better way to pay your bills than through a gig in the bike industry? Well, on our recent visit to Fox's headquarters in California, I had a chance to sit down with my longtime friend, Ariel Lindsley. Today, Ariel does R&D and product development at Fox, but he's been working on the supplier side for almost 20 years now. I'm hoping Ariel's story will inspire some of you, as his story has certainly inspired me during my most formative years. While many of us had dreams of being some sort of professional rider or racer, there isn't actually any sort of reliable paycheck in that realm. And if it is reliable, no guarantees it'll have functioning damping and won't just bounce. Instead, the secret sauce many of us have found is to provide value through using the knowledge and skills, all learned while riding, and working at bike shops, all within the supplier side. But let's back up slightly. I first met Ariel in 2008, shortly after long-haired and bandana Jeff had just graduated from university. A few friends and I made the 6-hour trip north from our hectic homes around the California Bay Area to race the then famous 12-mile Super D in peaceful Ashland, Oregon. During practice, we rode with Ariel and ended up on a few shuttles together. Ariel has a really unique background. Originally from Santa Cruz, California, Ariel eventually landed in the mountain biking promised land of Boulder, Colorado. Among other bike shop gigs, he eventually found himself working in the warranty department at Pearl Izumi and riding his bike all over. Folks encouraged him to then race, and pretty quickly, he was racing mountain bikes in the ages of 63 millimeters of fork travel and finishing really, really well. Ariel raced cross-country and endurance events professionally for the famous Subaru Gary Fisher team, the same team as Olympic gold medalist Paulo Pezzo. Ariel absolutely rocked the endurance world for many years as a top racer, until making moves into less nerdy and more downhill-focused events. Many of these events were centered around the Mountain States Cup Series during their heyday in the mid-2000s. Along came Super D, which eventually morphed into Enduro, and it was a perfect stage to showcase his wide range of skills. Ariel is a fairly unique type of cyclist who could race with the best in the world on the more fitness-based events, but then also hang with the absolute top downhill racers. While that's somewhat more common now, back in the mid-2000s, this was about as common as penguins wandering the desert. When Ariel went from working at Pearl Izumi to being more hands-on with suspension tech at Maverick, it really began the rest of his career, which included stints at Yeti Cycles and at Santa Cruz Bikes, and finally to Fox back in 2013. So let's sit down with Ariel and have a little chat. Everyone, this is kind of a really special interview. I'm here with my friend Ariel. We were roommates for a few years, and I've known Ariel since '08, Ashland, Oregon.
Is that it?
Going way back.
Dude, you got a good memory. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just remember knowing you for most of my biking career.
Most.
Feels like
That's kind of a while ago now. Shit, that's like.
It turns out.
But you've got a cool background because you kind of got into the Maverick suspension side with Paul Turner.
Yeah. Old
school, original, legend of suspension, motorcycles and mountain bikes.
Yeah.
And it seems like things have changed so much since the early 2000s to today.
Definitely, yeah. That was kind of my first job, like working with someone who developed suspension, you know. I'd worked in a lot of bike shops. I knew how to tear down suspension and rebuild it, all the basics there, but I was racing, right? I thought that was it. I was going to race, and that was all I was really focused on at the time. And
was this road or mountain racing?
Well, it was a little bit of both at that time.
That's cool.
And Enduro didn't exist, unfortunately. But I think in the reality of things, I always liked doing that kind of riding. I wanted to go out and push my bike down steep trails as hard as I could. But there wasn't a really developed scene for that. It wasn't just like downhill on really weird heavy bikes back then. All bikes were a little weird back then, I think. Yeah, I was doing a lot of racing, and I met Paul because I was living in Boulder, and we had he had a cool riding scene at his house, and so some people took me up and I rode that stuff. Anyway, long story short, he was like, hey, I heard through some friends you're going down to race Moab, and you're a pretty good rider, you're doing well. He's like, I'm making this new fork. You'd be stoked if you wanted to go ride it for 24 hours and see how it does. And I was like, yeah, because I'd heard about it and it was talked about around town. And it was pretty cool. It was really lightweight. It was 6 inches of travel. Dual crown fork that weighed like 3.25 pounds, which didn't exist at the time. And I believed in long travel. Somewhere in the back of my head, I knew that it could be done and you could ride fast on long travel, right? But in those days, people weren't thinking that way. And so he gave me a fork to ride. Unfortunately, like midway through the race, I lost rebound. And I was like, what happened? The fork just started topping out. Yeah. Oh, what am I going to do? So I came back to the pits. And luckily I was doing a duo, told the other person they had to go a lap earlier and they wanted to. And I was like, no, I got to go back. Didn't say anything. Went and found my buddy at the Cannondale truck because he had head shock stuff. Pulled the damper out, figured out that I had cracked a valve because it was like a really light valve stack and broke off a chunk. And now the port was exposed and I was just topping out. Dug through his valve bin, found a valve that fit, buttoned it back up. Those old dampers were super simple, slapped it back together, got back out there the next lap and kept racing. And I got back, he asked me how it went. I said, well, it went really well, but I lost rebound. And then I found my friend at the Cannondale truck, but I fixed it and blah, blah, blah. And then he looked at me kind of funny and was like, do you want to work here?
That's awesome.
And I worked there for about 5 years for him and Frank Vogel, who also taught me quite a bit about suspension and just machining everything. So really fun experience.
That's awesome. So Paul offers you the gig at Maverick, and then you have a 5-year stint at which people might not understand is like brand new suspension from the ground up.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool what he was doing. Like he really believed in long travel bikes that could still be light and you'd pedal long travel. And in those days we had heavy bikes that we would try to pedal that were long travel, but they were pretty piggy and it was a lot of work. We wouldn't admit it to ourselves back then, but it wasn't maybe as fun as it is today, if that's for sure. So I was excited to be part of that because I believed in it. I wanted to ride a long travel bike all the time and ride hard trails, but pedal to them. So
I think Maverick was onto a lot of really, really pretty like things that have proven to still be very current today. But I don't think they had the seat angle quite dialed in. What was the deal with those slack seat angles?
I don't know. So I wouldn't say I didn't design the bike. I did funny things to make it work, but that was definitely not ideal. It was still 2000 something, so nothing was going to be ideal yet.
Seat angles were slack for until like 2018 or 19 or something.
It was a weird setup, man.
Talk about riding style and how that's changed in the last 20 years and how that affects suspension.
Yeah. Geez, when I was starting, it was like mostly hardtails, some full suspension. The full suspensions that were out there were pretty bad and pretty funky, and it was just a growing pain of figuring it all out, what works and what doesn't, and how do people want to ride. And as things got a little bit better, people went and tried to do more on the bikes. I think it's that natural progression in all of mountain biking. But I know we just always are in a better spot than we used to. Hindsight's easy, right? But when you're on the front side of it, I think about that a lot with bike geometry. It's like, even a hardtail didn't have to be built the way it was built 20 years ago. We could have built them with the geometry we have now. Just didn't. I don't know why, man. We just couldn't. It just takes time for people to like push the boundaries, find too far, find something that doesn't work, and come back to what does, or to continue to move forward in another direction and change the bikes. And that happened in everything from kinematics, just to shock technology, fork technology, seat posts, all that stuff. But it is also, I think, it also feels slow at times, right? Like one of my sayings is there's only a 1 in 10 year idea every 10 years. You know what I mean?
So it's very obvious, and I like it. That's cool.
Like those are things like I call like dropper seat posts, right? Like took a long time till someone was like, we got to be able to do this on the fly, right? And
Maverick is probably the second dropper post
it was,
company
behind
Gravity Dropper.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Or Anthony Medegula putting a 40 spring in, or a boxer spring in his seat tube. But
right, reimagined.
Totally. But yeah, it takes time for those big ideas to hit and to stick if they're going to be good enough. Yeah.
And so I think you're in a really unique position, and Fox is very positively benefiting from it because you have a lot of experience wrenching on bikes at a high level. Like you've never, as far as I know, been a professional mechanic. You've always been the professional racer.
Really. Yeah.
But then I see you working on your bike a ton, and you've got a very technical, hands-on background.
Yeah.
You were a technician at Fox for a while, but now you're working between the engineers and the...
Yeah, kind of the whole process, but
But it seems like Fox stuff is very intuitive to work on, and there's very few like, this bolt is only accessible with your Allen key in the least effective possible angle. Like those kind of pitfalls have been avoided.
We do the best we can.
Yeah.
I've always liked being hands-on, my racing was a fairly privateer approach, I had a few stints on some teams with a pretty big budget, but, and did a lot of wrenching there. But I think more than anything, I just got to be around a lot of people that were really good at working on bikes and teaching me to get better at it, or showing me tricks that I didn't know. And it's the ability to listen and learn that makes you better, and I've had that opportunity. And I think, when we talked about like the seat post being serviceable, like it gets hard, you know what I mean? These things get complex, but you want to make it somewhat easy to work on and understand, we just have a philosophy that things shouldn't be like I mean, there's always going to be small fragile parts in suspension, but we want it to be something that's functional. We have to work on it. I take these things apart and put them back together hundreds and hundreds of times before they ever get into market. And when you're pissed off at something because it keeps stripping out, or it just like it slows you down, like I get mad if I break apart and I get it back on the I want to iterate valving. I'm going crazy on the dyno. It's like if something's terrible to take apart and put back together, it just drives you nuts. And I think a lot of these people experience that because they all have to work on their stuff at some point. And so, yeah, and you know, we want it to be able to go into our service department and not waste parts and come back out a freshened up, brand new.
Go in and out nice and quick.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Are you doing much with data acquisition?
Yes, we use data acquisition.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird subject. Like I feel like there's a lot of information to be gathered, but at the same time, I'm very skeptical of just putting a potentiometer on my bike or my fork and my shock and having a program spit out that I need to do this and or I need to do that.
Yeah.
We've evaluated that pretty deeply, and you know, you get so much information and it feels like those programs are probably making a lot of generalizations over a giant amount of data. And when you have that big a data set that it's looking at, there's a lot of things that can skew that data that probably shouldn't be in there. You know, I'm optimistically skeptical, but and I think it maybe can be helpful at times, but I also see it almost lead people astray as much as it helps. That said, when we want to know what's going on a bike, a shock and a fork on trail, those things are awesome. We put potentiometers on a bike, we take that data, and then we take that into our own software, our own tools on the computer, and look at things we want and find, and are able to see the numbers we want to know. And then we can go use those numbers to tune on the dyno and understand where we want to be or where we want to affect things. So it's a very useful tool, but you really need to be able to like read that stuff well.
Interpreting it is so challenging.
And I guess what I would challenge everyone to say is like, anytime you have one of those things and you look at your phone and it's telling you to do something, who is behind that curtain, right? Who's the Wizard of Oz back there pulling the levers? Because they're the one that's tuning your bike now.
I did a bunch of tuning with Motion Instruments.
Yep.
Learned a ton, and then tried their like recommended setup. Was not for me. Like, I'm not a racer. I'm not trying to go as fast as possible.
Totally.
I'm just trying to have fun and do some jumps and do some wheelies and like not go slow, but 9/10 is fast enough.
There's a lot of information that system gives you that could be useful for anybody. You know what I mean? Like, and actually we use that system to collect data, but we can also take just the data files out of it too for us, you know, and that's more how we're using it at Fox, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to get the data on, but I think, reading it's tricky. You got to be careful. There's a lot to it.
Burned out on trying to Bluetooth my phone to this stuff all the time. Like,
you know, I mean, I'm supposed to be a super technical guy, but because you and I both know, like I love getting geeked out as much as I hate geeking out.
You taught me how to airdrop 15 years ago.
Can't believe. That's amazing.
Yeah. I never heard of that. I'm like, air what?
Yeah.
So I had a flip phone at the time, I think.
I don't think it's going to work with your flip phone, Jeff. Yeah,
I think it does now. They got flip phones all airdrop.
Totally,
yeah, wild.
So you can be a hipster with a flip phone and airdrop.
Right? I was asking Sergio a little bit about how back in the 90s, the purpose of suspension seemed a bit different than what we think suspension is now.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, have you seen much on your end of like back in the day, people thought of suspension more as comfort.
Yeah.
And nowadays, like the ultimate definition is far more control.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess maybe the mindset has shifted. I think also like longer travel, as we've gotten moved up into long, like, you know, the early days when we were talking 100 mil travel, like and it wasn't even that good at travel on other bikes. It's like, we're just trying to take the edge off the bumps, right? Like maybe I want a full suspension bike for XC because it's a really bumpy course. I want to be able to sit and pedal and not just get pounded, right? So that was kind of when we were in the short travel days. You couldn't do that much but as travel progressed and geometry progressed, now you're taking the bike out and pushing it really hard down really gnarly steep trails. Jumps get bigger. The average rider is a better rider because they have bike parks to access and good trails to access now. So I think the suspension had to progress with it because we're asking the bike to do more. And when you do that, you're not just using the suspension to take the edge off the bumps anymore to make you comfortable. You're actually like, I'm going to land this jump into these rocks, and if it was rigid, I'd just explode, right? And so that's like the difference, right? Now we're trying to like use that suspension to control your bike and you, so you don't crater off the side or, you know, go ass over tea kettle. it's creating control, right? It's creating safety and control and traction, so you can go faster and corner harder because your bike's capable of doing it, right?
Brake harder.
Brake, all the things, right? Like, and you know, suspension is a huge component of being able to do all that stuff better if you get it right.
I've been a big rigid bike guy the last few weeks. It's so much fun.
Great experience. Makes you a damn good rider. It makes you tough.
It's not even that bad. I got a cheater rigid bike though. It's got all the parts. It helps out so much.
Yeah, it's fun. I still have a hardtail. I go ride it. It's great.
Sweet.
Yeah, totally.
Still have your Kona Townie bike?
I do. The bummer is I moved to Corralitos, and so it's not as fun to ride around town.
Yeah, the market.
But I'm never getting rid of that bike. It's awesome. Sweet. Yeah. Has a Maverick fork on it, actually.
The last known one in existence.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I've seen some on trails on like modern Ripmos and stuff up north of Mendocino. Some guys love them still.
That's awesome. It was pretty cool, man. It's light. I mean, it was simple. Did a lot of things really well. Yeah.
Oh, is Fox ever going to do a linkage fork?
I'll never say no. We're never done.
They're like, I hope not.
I mean, we've looked at the ones that come out. You know, we take a look at everything.
Trust me, they had a few things going for it, but it was done backwards, and that was disappointing for me.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we take a look at everything that comes out. We try to get one and ride it and understand it, because, you know, if you're not looking and listening, you're not learning. And there's other people out there that do things well and are super smart, and so they're not all in this building. And I think you're missing the boat if you're not trying to look around and see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. Respecting it it can be valid as well.
Right. Yeah. No, a lot of respect. Right. Like, yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Sick, dude. Yeah, we're having time. Yeah. Stoked to hang out with you guys. Yeah.
If you guys enjoyed this video with Ariel, please let me know any questions you may have for him down in the comments down below, and do hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much, everyone. Peace and wheels.